Hello and welcome to the Rogue Monkey podcast and episode 54. We're the podcast that simply asks the question, is there a better way? We speak to people from all walks of life and explore their journeys, extracting lessons and inspiration for all our listeners and viewers. It's all about being creative, open-minded and always seeking ways to improve. This week we speak to retired international swimmer Lauren Quigley. It's a wonderful story that Lauren shares with us, and we will explore how post-swimming Lauren, through her company Quigley Sport, now mentors and supports young athletes on their journey. The idea behind Quigley Sport came from Lauren's passion for sport, transferring 18 years of being involved in the sporting world and passing on the lessons learned to help the next generation. Just before we dive into this episode, please make sure if you've not already clicked subscribe to the podcast, please do, and give us a quick follow on whatever social medias you use. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. So, here we go with episode 54 of the Rogue Monkey podcast. Lauren Quigley, the journey from being a professional athlete to athlete mentor. Hello Lauren and welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for sharing some time with us today. It's exciting to have you on, fellow podcaster, former swimmer. I'm sure we've got lots of cool stuff to explore in the next half hour or so. But just to give us a quick introduction to all our listeners and viewers out there, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm Lauren Quigley. I'm, as you said, an ex-international Great Britain swimmer. I competed at 2 World Championships and a Commonwealth Games where I got 3 silver medals. But I'm just a girl trying to help the swimming world really, as much as I can, and with that being open and honest about my time in swimming and hoping to help the next generation in any way that I can. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell really.
Awesome. Well, we'll unpick lots of the different things you're doing, but I'm curious to kind of track right back to the start and your swimming journey. Where did it all start? What was your earliest memory of being involved in the sport?
I don't know if it's my earliest memory or I've been told about it so much, but I remember going to watch my mum swim at our first club called Saracens, Hazel Grove, and just watching her swim up and down. I used to hold the coach's hand and just walk up and down with him and just not take my eyes off her swimming. And I just wanted to follow in her footsteps because she was actually, she competed for Great Britain herself in swimming. So did my auntie, went to the Olympics. So it was almost like, I want to be like them. This is where I'm going to start. And she didn't actually want us to swim to start with because she'd done it all herself and knew it was hard and all those sorts of things. She sort of tried to put us in every other sport, but I wanted to be like mum. So I was in the pool and, as soon as she realised that that's what I wanted to do, she was 100% supportive and just wanted me to have a great career really. So yeah, it all started at Saracens for me, my home club. They were fantastic, and it was probably the best start I could have had with the sport.
That's fascinating. And obviously this is all new information, and I'm sure for a lot of people out there perhaps don't know your backstory. So in terms of, I guess, the journey and all of the hurdles you've ever come across the way, to have a family circle, if you like, that's been there and done it in some respects. And very often, when I talk to athletes or parents of athletes, they say we made it up as we went along, we rolled with the punches, whereas actually you almost probably had some support, that little tips and things that really helped you. So was that some stuff that you can kind of relate to over the years?
Yeah, definitely. I always think there's pros and cons of everything. Obviously, having a mum that had gone through it all was amazing because it was almost sort of like a cheat sheet in some ways, because she understood and she could be like, oh, maybe don't do that, or that's a good idea. But also it was difficult sometimes because she probably knew a lot. So I'd get out of a race and she'd know really if I'd have swam well or not. Like a lot of parents that aren't in the sport, they go, that was great, and they're not really too sure on whether it was or not. Whereas mum understood splits and everything. But it's about that line of, you're my mum, not my coach. And so, it must be difficult for her watching me to be able to split the two and go, that was great, and leave my coach to talk to me about it. But she was fantastic, and she sort of stepped in at the right time. So when I was younger, and all my friends were doing all the sessions, the coach said, you need to do all these mornings and you know, all the sessions and do all the training. And this is when I was super young. She'd be like, you're not doing it. I don't want you doing all the mornings yet. And I'd be really upset. I'm like, Mum, please let me, you know, why aren't you letting me do it? And she's like, you don't need to be doing it all yet. Do other sports as well, you know, try and mix it up a bit. And it was only later on then, 15, 16, where all of those people that I trained with had pretty much quit and hated it and burnt out. And I was still going then for years to come. So you know, it's fantastic that I had the opportunity of someone who'd done it before me, and I could just, you know, it's a cheat sheet, like I said.
It's interesting because I think something that a lot of people struggle to get their heads around, and obviously it's challenging for parents because there's the emotional aspect of it being your child and you want them to being successful and doing the best they can, is actually there's no such thing as an elite 12-year-old. And I think the nature of some sports, you know, perhaps like gymnastics and swimming and maybe diving, where there's that little bit earlier specialization, there is that danger of getting sucked in. And I was on a call recently with Bert and Chad Leclos, and one of the swimmers asked him around, how are you still going in like your late 20s? And he said, when I was young, I didn't do everything that was thrown at me. I balanced other sports out. I had a good circle of friends that supported me on this journey. And actually I had somewhere to go with it. And I think that's something that, regardless of what sport you've actually, whether it's you or your children are in, it's very easy to get suckered into this more is better approach at a young age. And it's like, well, if you max them out by the time they're 14 or 15, where do you go? Because you can't give them 10 physio sessions a week and have 15 nutritionists around poolside if by the age of 15 that's all there for them. So I think it's really nice to unpick that a little bit and see this thread that runs through successful athletes, that they pace themselves, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think I get a lot of parents that approach me, and have for years, even when I was still swimming, saying, oh, my child needs to be doing more, or how much does my child need to be doing, or and it's really difficult because obviously coaches are performance driven a lot of the time, and so they want results, so they want the kids to be doing it all and getting the results. And I used to say that they, like, some people would say, oh, this kid's best at 13 in the country, this kid's, you know, the best at 12 or whatever, and I used to say that's great, but they want to be up there when they're older, at the, you know, at late teens, early 20s, and continue that. So although that's brilliant now, what's the step up for them that's going to make sure that they continue being at the top? Because a lot of the time, the ones that are winning when they're young aren't around at all when you get older. And so it's about managing, and it's not easy. You know, I appreciate as a parent or as a coach or whatever, it's not easy to balance and to get that right, because obviously every swimmer is individual. But it is about trying to manage so that they do still love it as they grow older, and they do still want to be at the top and chase that, or, you know, it's a healthy relationship between them and the sport they're doing.
I think that's the key phrase you just said there. Healthy relationship is something that jumps out at me. And I think we'll come onto the podcast in a bit that you host with Jazz, but actually being still in love with the sport once you've finished doing it and still wanting to be involved in it. And the volume of people in just wider life that I cross paths with, and they say, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm involved in swimming. And they go, swimming, hated it because I was forced to do 12 sessions a week or whatever it was at 11. And actually you're like, yeah, forget even, you know, obviously we're having this conversation now, but forget even making it to like high performance world championships, senior international. Actually, do you love what you're doing? Because if you don't love it at 12, you're definitely not going to be loving it when you're kind of 18, 19, 20. And I think there's this whole wider journey aspect. And that's why I love listening to some of the podcasts that you and Jazz talk about, and your actual experiences along the way, those decisions, if you like, to fall in love with it. And because of it's balanced, it's manageable, it's gradually getting increased, actually then means that, you know, at the ripe old age in your 20s, when you stepped away from competing, actually you're like, I still want to be involved in it. I still love this sport, instead of you can't get out the door quick enough. And I think there's probably a lot of athletes we could have conversations with that would say, I was done. Once I'm done, I never want to see a pool again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, you know, I went through the hating it. 2016, an awful year for me. And, I went to a dark place with it and I hated it. And I'd always loved swimming. And so after that, I was lucky enough, I spent like 3 months just hating it. Like, I'm never going to swim again. And a lot of people get to that point with it because they do so much of it for so long. And so, but I was lucky enough to have a supportive family and a coach down the road who just said, look, you can't finish on that. Don't finish hating it. Let's get you back in. But we had the conversation of, I'm not getting back in to be a world beater. I'm getting back in to love the sport again that I've loved for so long. And so the goal for me was to enjoy it. Well, what better goal can you have, in any sport than to just enjoy it? For me at that time, it was perfect. And I did. I got back in and just enjoyed it. Didn't put any pressure on myself or anything like that. And obviously in swimming, you have to have the balance and in the end finish, in terms of I didn't have the fire to race, but I loved the sport. So I'd got out of it what I needed to. And some of those, I trained with a guy called Anthony Evans, loved training with him. And it was more of like, it wasn't about the medals and the records and everything. And that actually, some of those times in that period were the best times in my swimming career. So yeah, great, you went to the World Championships, you Commonwealth Games and all that's, good stuff. Actually, some of the best times were when I was just enjoying it and working hard and had great people around me. So it's Jazz and I talk about it a lot on our podcast, but it's great that people have these accolades, but actually the more interesting stories or the people that feel they were really successful don't always come from the medals and everything like that. It's more of the experience they had, and they actually embrace the journey instead of always chasing something. Actually, at points in their career, they went, "Oh, that was great. I swam really well," or that training session. How amazing was that? So yeah, it's an interesting one for sure, being a swimmer.
Do you think that's kind of spawned, I guess, this like post-athlete business world that you've been getting involved in around supporting athletes? Because you're almost, I don't know about you, but I feel like almost one of the lucky ones. When I look back at some of those programs, as we used to call them, I was doing a talk with a group of athletes the other day and showed them the old swimming magazine from like the late 90s, and they're like, what's that? And I was like, that was before we had the internet. And I look at the lists of the names on there and I can pick out like maybe 1 in 100 that's still in some way involved in the sport. And actually it's kind of like, well, because that one person made it to the end, that's how we do it. And it's like, there's definitely a better way of doing this. So did that kind of drive you to get involved in, obviously explore what you're doing with Quigley Sport, and actually where did that come from, the desire to do that?
I love sport and I've known all my life that I wanted to stay involved in it in some way, in some capacity. I didn't know in what way, but I just knew that I wanted to stay within it. And through my career, there were moments where I would talk to the younger athletes. I would always make the effort, especially at my clubs, to go to the younger athletes, to go to the younger groups and talk to them, make sure they're all good, even if that was just on poolside, of just like, how are you doing? Are you enjoying it? Those simple questions actually go quite a long way sometimes. And I remember being at Sheffield and I think it was the Nationals or Winter Nationals maybe, or something like that. And there was a girl in tears breaking down on poolside. She was a bit younger than me and I didn't know her at all. But I just went over and I actually spent about 20 minutes just sat with her, talking about if she was okay, why she was upset. And she hadn't actually raced bad. She still had her race to come, but she was really homesick. And that's something that I struggled with when I was younger, big time, due to things that happened in my life when I was younger. But just, it was something that I could relate to. And so I could talk to her. And so we talked for about 20 minutes. She calmed down. She felt a lot better. I like to hope. But she then contacted me not long ago and said, you probably won't remember me, but you spoke to me at Nationals and blah, blah, blah. And I'm still in swimming now and I cope with it, homesick, a lot better. And, it was a real turning point. And that moments like that made me realize that the mentoring side is something that I wanted to explore a bit more. So like I said, I wanted to stay within swimming, but I don't think I had the passion or anything to want to go into just coaching or anything like that. I don't think that was, I wanted to go a bit deeper into how can I share my experiences and help, other swimmers or younger swimmers, or something that I didn't have, maybe a gap that's missing. And so that's where the mentoring came from. And obviously I've explored that a bit more and developed my own program. And I'm now working with athletes that are doing amazingly. And it's nice to be able to fill a bit of a gap for some people. But I love sport as well. I just love it. I love being in the sport world. I completely agree with what you said about being one of the lucky ones for sure, because loads of my old swimming friends hate it, don't want anything to do with it, don't want to see a pool. Whereas I'm like, get me there, get me involved. How can I help out, really? So that's where it stems from, I think.
I think as well, like I know we spoke about it before we started recording around the honesty. And I think 10, 20 years ago, partially perhaps due to the culture, but also due to the lack of digital opportunities, you wouldn't get these kind of stories shared en masse. Whereas actually, I know from talking to athletes over previous seasons, we can put something out and within, a month, 1,000 athletes and their parents have listened to it. And actually you're then like, wow, actually it's not a taboo to say, actually, if you get this wrong, you're probably going to put a negative spin on swimming for life. And I think I know we talked about it right at the start where you said, obviously your achievements and you had some amazing outcomes, if you like. But actually what we're unpicking here is this journey element, because it doesn't really matter where you get to in your swimming world. If you go on and have kids, you're probably going to want them to learn to swim. And actually your view on swimming, if you've had a really bad club experience as a young athlete, then you become a parent, this becomes self-sustaining. And I think people lose sight of actually how dangerous that can be. So kind of looking forwards on the stuff you're doing now, do you think there's an opportunity with the podcast and the other stuff you're doing to actually start to break through that like taboo culture where we can't talk about these sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean that's our aim. It's to like we've said before, and you've just alluded to there. The honesty is, Jazz and I sat down and we spoke about what do we want to do and how can we do it and what's the best way of doing it. And we actually came to the conclusion, I'm sure like yourself, of being honest is the best thing. What can we talk about that will hopefully help others? Well, our experiences, we swam, as as you did, we swam for years and years and years. If you study something for that long, you know a lot about it. And so we're in that position of having lived it, breathed it, and learned so much about it that it would be a waste to just not help from what you've learned the next generation or coaches or parents or whatever that is. And B, it's what's better than experience, really. It's your truth and it's what you've been through. And more often than not, people listening will have experienced something similar or the same, or it will help them deal with a situation they might be going through. And so, that's all we do. We try and make it fun as well. Obviously, we don't want it to be all like super serious, but there's things that even from me talking to Jazz that have made me realize things, and I hope vice versa. So it's just about opening up, being honest, being yourself, and if that helps one person, then we're all good with that.
So let's talk a little bit about the podcast. Where did this first idea spawn from? For those who haven't obviously come across Jazz in the swimming world, double Olympic medalist, competed at all the different levels of sport, highly experienced international swimmer like yourself, and actually probably had your very different journeys, if you like. So how did that kind of all come together in suddenly putting this podcast out there?
Well, Jazz and I swam together on the GB team, and we know each other pretty well, and good friends and all that sort of stuff. And we spoke a few times through lockdown of we've got the same sort of beliefs, the same intention with what we're trying to do. I have Quigley Sport, she has Swim with Jazz, and so we just had a conversation about what can we do. And so we came up with doing some swim camps abroad, and we probably set that up at the worst time possible when a big global pandemic's about to to hit. But so we've been planning to do those, and all through lockdown, you know, all we can do, as everyone knows, is just plan and get ready for when things open up. So that will be coming up. I think we've moved it to June now, so hopefully, fingers crossed, that will be able to go ahead, but we'll see. And so when lockdown 3 hit, we had another discussion of, we're both really keen and ready to help in any way we can. And obviously in ways that we wanted to, we can't do that right now because of the pandemic. So what's the next thing? What can we do? And it was actually Jazz's suggestion to do a podcast. And I'd thought about it as well briefly before, but never voiced it. And so we were just like, let's do it. It wasn't even something we thought about, you know, like for a long time. It was like, Jazz was like, do you want to do a podcast and maybe talk about our own experiences? And it was like, yeah, let's do it. Next week we recorded. And now we're just into this weekly thing of talking about all different topics in swimming and hoping to help. And so that's where it started really, and it's going really well. And I think the way it's gone so well is because we've both been so honest and open, and we don't really shy away from any topics, or we haven't yet, but who knows? We might get a really difficult one soon. But no, yeah, it's just, that's where it stemmed from, and that's how we thought we could help out right now.
Awesome. And I think like saying I'd be keen to unpick a little bit more is this kind of notion of like adversity along the journey, because you know, everyone seems to just see, especially in the world of social media, this polished end product, whether that's you holding up, you know, a Commonwealth medal, or Jazz achieving her goals, or whatever it is, and going, well, that's it. That's a swimming Olympian or a swimming international athlete, whatever it is. And actually you're kind of going, well, actually, if I listed the top 10 things from my swimming journey, if you like, that stick with me, maybe it's that moment of you talking to a girl on poolside, maybe whatever else it is, it's suddenly a whole list of experiences that anyone, whatever level of sport they're at, can listen to and go, I can relate to that. Yeah, I can relate to that. I'm a young female growing and developing and really struggling. Hey, they did that too. Let's have a listen and, you know, see if I can relate to more stuff on it. So do you kind of think going forwards again that actually it's going to open up, probably like you alluded to there, some discussions you probably never even thought about because you just took it for granted, but actually you're going to get people get in touch, go, well, that's a problem for me too, or I struggle with that. How did you overcome those issues?
I don't know really. I think the good thing was that we didn't overthink it. We just did it. And, you know, I learned very quickly how to do podcasts, edit, and all that sort of stuff. And we just got it out there, and we didn't, it's when you're involved in the sport, you're at a team, sometimes it's hard to speak out. Jazz and I are in a great position now, as you know, where you're not really tied to anything or anyone, and you can just speak honestly and not have to worry. And so I think not having those limitations on what we're trying to do, and from the feedback that we've got, and you get ideas from people that, well, maybe you should talk about this, or like you say, I relate to that, or that episode really struck a chord or helped me, or whatever that is. And so with those comments, you don't really think about how am I going to deal with this or speak about that. It just gives you the confidence, or I don't know how you'd word it, but just to just go, well, it's helping people, and what have I got to lose? This is what I want to do, and this is the whole aim for us. So there's no question, we just do it. We just talk about it, and obviously you don't want to say anything that will give you backlash, but at the same time, do you know what? Being honest is actually probably going to be what helps you the most, really. So do you know what? If you want to help, you've got to go through that and just be honest.
I think it's obviously to a much greater extreme. I was having a conversation in season 3 about the whole Athlete A thing that came out in the last few years. And spoke to the producer of that at length, and she was saying, you know, I'm in my 50s and it's now coming to light, and people have now got this confidence to speak out. And actually, whatever level of adversity is, obviously with the extreme examples of what happened there, but all the way through to just, I had a bad experience because somebody said something nasty to me once and no one picked up on it. You know, actually just having athletes coming to the fore with this, and not just in swimming, but in sport in general. And then actually young people listening to that thinking, oh, maybe I can speak up. Maybe I can say that I'm not particularly enjoying this, or I'm not happy with that. And it might seem like exactly what you said, keeping it simple and a really just honest, open discussion, but actually it can open up some really powerful narratives. And just as your example of that young girl on poolside, a simple conversation or a single comment can actually change someone's life. And that must be, I know it's still like early days and it's growing and developing, but you're no doubt going to get more and more of that as you go through this journey.
Yeah, definitely hope to. And you've just mentioned there, not just in swimming, that I'd started off and sort of in lockdown one, called it Quigley Swim, and actually soon after changed it to Quigley Sport, because although it's different sports, it's all the same emotions. And you're training and you're competing, and yeah, you might be doing a different activity, but actually the same emotions and the same problems that you go through. Most sports are, if not all sports, there's similar issues. And even, I think we've said it in the Honest Athletes podcast, but it's like, even though I think it's in the retired one or finishing the sport or whatever, it doesn't matter if you went to the Olympics or you just did club champs. Again, it's all the same emotions that you're going through: the nerves, the excitement, the disappointments. All of those emotions are exactly the same. And yes, one competition is bigger than the other, but actually, your body doesn't know that. It just knows it's going to compete. And so it upsets me when people say, "Oh, but I never got to your level," or "I never achieved what you achieved," because I always say it doesn't matter. Like I said before, the accolades are brilliant and they help you have a bit more of a voice. But actually, I've got a friend who I swam with for years who didn't manage to achieve getting on teams and stuff like that. But her story will help more people than some people that went to the Olympics and won gold. So it's just about being sort of cross-platform, cross-sports, open with everyone, and not just pinpointing just one person or one age or one achievement or whatever that is. It's just like, look, we're all doing the same thing. It's just you might have a medal around your neck and I don't. But actually, my experience, I can teach people more.
Yeah, and it is a hugely powerful. And I had a conversation with a coach this morning, and we were talking about the relatability. And I think that's something that, again, when you talk about experiences and the journey, 99.9% of athletes know, whether it's game day, if you're a footballer, or whether it's a series, if you're in whatever sport you're in, they can relate to pre-competition nerves, for example, or they can relate to juggling exams whilst they're going through training. And there's so many things. And not just that, see, one of the things I've noticed through the podcast, because we don't just talk to sports people, we talk to people outside of sport, and they're saying, school was a real challenge because I always wanted to do this, whatever this was. And I was trying to juggle working hard at that whilst swimming. And you're like, whilst at school. And you're like, oh, that relates quite clearly to sport. And they're saying, I'm really goal driven and I have this process of how I get to my business or whatever it is. And then you're like, oh, it's kind of the similar thing to sport. So I think it'd be really interesting over the next few years whether you get more and more inquiries beyond the world of sport that actually are going to take those lessons and apply it to their world, because we're all on a journey. It doesn't matter what industry or world you're in, we're all on a journey, and it's just sharing those experiences. So that'll be a really interesting aspect, I guess, going outside of your sphere of swimming, but actually some very similar messages.
Yeah, and I think it shows that that's definitely the case, because I don't work with just swimmers. I don't just have swimmers in my athlete mentoring, which is amazing, because it forces me to apply it to different sports and to relate in different ways, and talk in a different way. But it's definitely it's everyone's in it, and whatever. I always say, whatever you're feeling, someone will have felt the same or very similar. So just to be honest and open about things.
Awesome. Well, I've got a couple more things I want to ask. The first thing is, reflecting back now, having closed the door, if you like, on the performance aspect of your swimming, looking back across that journey from when you first remember it all starting, what have you taken from that massive period of time that you now use on the kind of a day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
I think enjoying what you do, really. That's always my number one. And I know it's very cliche and a lot of people say it, but in terms of so for example, with swimming is a tough sport. If you don't love it, if you do love it, it's tough. If you don't love it, it's impossible. And you can't enjoy everything. I'm not like Disney World, although I am Disney World, but I'm not all like fairy tale, like this is perfect, everyone should be happy, and enjoying every single second, because that's definitely not the case. But right at the core of what you're doing, are you enjoying it? I think that's super important. That's a great question. I think I'll just keep it simple with that. Just then make sure you're enjoying it. And if you're enjoying it and working hard, it will pay off.
Well, it would lead on to my second question, but you sort of answered it. But then obviously by what we discussed earlier, the very nature that you're still involved in the sport in some angle means you enjoyed it. So if you had to go back to, your 7, 8, 9-year-old self and give yourself, one piece of advice to put you in good stead for what's become an amazing journey, both inside and outside of the swimming pool, what would you say to yourself?
I'd say, other than enjoy it, I'd say believe in yourself and communicate. So I think those two are two big things. There's lots of things that I could talk about, but I think believing in yourself is something that a lot of people struggle with. And as long as you're giving 100% at whatever you're doing, then you have no choice really other than to believe in yourself. And it's obviously a big mental game, and it's not as easy as just saying it. I'll believe in yourself, right? Sorted. But yeah, as long as you're giving 100%, then that's all you can do. It's believe and go for it. If you believe in what you're doing, then you'll do well, no matter how long that takes. And when I say give 100%, I used to hate it when people would say that. Are you giving 100%? Are you giving 100%? Because sometimes I'd be like, but 100% isn't always 100%. And then people sometimes think, what are you talking about? I say, if you're giving 100% on Monday, it might not be the same as 100% on Tuesday. It might only be 64%. But that is your 100% that day. So I don't mean you'll be PBing and doing great every single day. But what I mean is on that day, you've given everything you've got. And it's not an easy thing to do. But if you can do that and enjoy it, the results will come in time. Because sometimes people go, well, I'm doing that, I'm not getting results. But it's about just believing, be confident. And I also mentioned communicate, because I kept quiet about a lot of things through my career that I didn't talk about, I didn't reach out, which is where I think mentoring comes again, because I want to be that person for people to be able to talk to about things. But if you can communicate honestly with your coach, with your parents, with support team, with whoever it is, teachers, whatever, that makes things a lot easier, instead of holding it all in. So I hope those are okay.
Absolutely fantastic. And as I mentioned, we'll make sure we include all the links, social media tags, everything to what you're up to, because it's been really exciting to watch kind of this transition. And one of the themes we've been talking around is how athletes move through not just the swimming world, but the sporting worlds, whether it's high performance or grassroots, to make sure they still carry that passion forwards into what they do. And you've kind of absolutely embodied that today. So thank you so much for sharing your time, and looking forward to kind of getting the feedback online and hopefully linking you up with some more people.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's great to see you doing such great things as well. I think there's a big gap where people say to me sometimes, oh, have you seen they're doing what you're doing, or you're doing what they're doing? And I go, well, yeah, but it's great, because more people need to be doing this. It's not just about, oh, I want to be the only one doing it. I want more people to be doing it. More people need to be doing similar things and helping in areas that there is a big gap. And so it's great to see what you're doing. And yeah, just keep up the great work, really. But thanks for having me on.
No, it's been awesome. And to say, we'll look forward to kind of hopefully connecting you with a bigger community, because there's so many people out there that I'm sure will relate to this kind of discussion. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Lauren, there for such a great conversation. It's great to see athletes stepping away from their competitive field and giving back to sport, and helping the next generation of athletes by sharing some of that wisdom learned through the ups and downs of their journey. The part that resonated the most with me is this notion of having a healthy relationship with sport. It's absolutely vital that we don't lose sight of this, and when we work, whether it's in the realms of performance or all the way down to grassroots, ultimately it is about enjoying the journey. This links nicely back to episode 33 with Kath Bishop, where we explored this idea around winning and the athlete experience. As mentioned in the conversation, Lauren now mentors athletes from a range of sports, as well as having an awesome podcast sharing some insights from both her own journey and that of Jazz Carlin. The links to everything are in the show notes, and we would urge you to share these within your circles, as there are so many people who will no doubt benefit from what Quigley Sport offers. So, on to next week, and we're having a very philosophical discussion with an educator from Singapore. He's first and foremost a coach, but he's explored some of the deeper reasons behind dropout rates in sport, and predominantly how we can potentially improve the way we engage with young people. It's a fascinating conversation, so be sure to join us for that. Just a final note to request: if you've not yet subscribed, please make sure you do so you don't ever miss an episode. We look forward to you joining us again soon for another episode of the Rogue Monkey Podcast.